With spooky season finally upon us, we felt it was a good time to share some of our paranormal experiences. A while back, I was invited to investigate Waverly Hills Sanatorium, and today I'm going to be going over a couple of experiences I had that night. Because of the specific nature of each video, I didn't feel that this was something that I could just post without any context. So we're going to be looking at these pieces of evidence, ruling out everything that we can, so that you can form your own opinion on what you think is going on in the footage, which we would love to hear in the comments below. The first item on this list is going to be very familiar to anyone who's ever been to Waverly, and that's inexplicable battery drainage. Over the course of the night, my camera light, which runs on 4 AA batteries, would randomly dim to about half intensity, and then would slowly fade out altogether. It started in the death tunnel, about 15 minutes after I first started using the light heavily, having fully charged batteries that I'd bought about a week before.
Why is your light flashing like that?
So my light's just sitting on the ground right now, flashing out of nowhere. Yeah, my light just randomly started flashing on its own. And now it's very dim. Oh, it's like dying.
So your battery, you just put that in.
Yeah, you watched me take it out of the package not even an hour ago. I changed the batteries once we got back to the 3rd floor where I had stashed them with the camera system. I even used brand new disposable batteries from an unopened pack. Same deal. About 10 minutes later, the light drops to half intensity, then fades out. I checked the connection on the lid where the battery lead's attached, and it was fine. This happened multiple times throughout the night where the light would die or dim and would suddenly come back on at random. Light just got brighter. Look how bright that is compared to a second ago. It's bright again. The intensity is all the way up. The strangest moment was probably on the 5th floor. The dimmer wheel on the light would no longer work. It was like something had overridden the control and was leaving it at a constant level. So this light has a dimmer on the side. Like, it's this little rolly thing right here.
Mm-hmm.
Watch this. I just rolled it all the way down to 0 and it's not changing. My meter batteries also started to die. Okay. Now this is dying. This meter. Later that night, we had the same pattern happen with my flashlight. It's very good.
That's awesome.
And also our laser grid.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't dim like that. I'd placed a couple of extra IR lights at the end of the hallways so that I could hopefully see anything that passed in front of them. In my evidence review, I noticed that one on the 3rd floor had acted similar to my camera light. It flickered in several instances and would even drop to half intensity at several points and return back to full. No one had passed by on any of the other cameras close to that time. I've tried to replicate this with no luck at all. I've tried everything from shaking the light to making a poor connection with the battery cover, and of course tampering with the dimmer wheel to see if I can get it to somehow disengage or get stuck at a certain level. I just couldn't get the light to do anything remotely similar. I've seen battery drainage before on investigations, but nothing that just overrode controls like that. There is a popular theory in the paranormal that entities will interrupt the point of connection between the battery and the device in order to feed off of the energy. So are we keeping that activity alive? Places like this become almost like a zoo exhibit where these entities exist. We, as spectators, are bringing them what they need in the form of human or battery energy. If you feed an animal, it usually comes back. So are we domesticating these ghosts, for lack of a better phrase? Something to think about. Can you make it bright again? That's good. That's very good. Thank you. This next experience was definitely the most interesting one that I've had in a very long time, and it's kind of been the source of a lot of internal controversy for me. So we were walking along the 2nd floor solariums, just casually exploring the floor. I have my camera pointed out forward, just scanning along, when directly ahead of me, I see a dark shadow move across the wall. Oh, hey. I really hope I got that on camera. Okay, so you see where my laser is right now? I saw a shadow go like that. Now you're not going to see anything on video at first, and that's where this one gets a little controversial. So to my eye, the wall in front of me was completely lit at the time of the incident. But at that distance, my GoPro, which is already notoriously bad for low light, struggled to capture any of what I could see beyond about 15 feet or so out in front of me. What I had seen was a small black shadow. I don't even want to say it was a ball. It wasn't perfectly round. It was kind of amorphous, in the sense that it almost looked like liquid in the way that it moved. It stayed flat to the wall and slid across the transom, and then moved down the doorframe and evaporated. It just seemed to shrink into nothing, like a pool of water drying up in an instant. It was one of those things that was so quick and hazy that later you almost wonder if you actually saw it at all. Naturally, I was super disappointed when I got home and reviewed the footage to find that it was too dark to really see. I was desperately hoping to have caught it on camera. I checked the thermal image at the time, but the thermal has a much more narrow field of view than the GoPro, and I could identify the edge of the window on the right, meaning my thermal was pointed too low to have the anomaly in frame. But I wasn't ready to give up. I started tinkering with the footage, I did some stabilizing, and tried some different techniques with exposure, contrast, color grading, whatever I could, just trying to see if I can see anything in the footage at all. And sure enough, I can see this faint dark shape in the distance, in the exact spot I would have saw the anomaly, at the exact time I would have had it on camera. It matches the movement, shape, and size of what I saw, and it can be seen on both sides of the transom, but not crossing the center of it. I used the laser sight on my thermal to tag where I saw the anomaly, and when I match up the frame from the video, we can see that the spot I tagged is exactly where the potential capture appears on camera.
I really hope I got that on camera. Okay, so you see where my laser is right now? I saw a shadow go like that.
I know it wasn't a shadow from anything physical for several reasons. My camera light was the only light source at the time.
You don't have a light right now, do you? So I'm the only light source.
Anything casting a shadow would have been in frame. I can also rule out the idea that maybe it was a bug super close to the light. For one thing, I can't see any bugs in the footage, and with my camera light being a multiple LED panel, it couldn't create a single unified shadow as small and defined as what I saw, especially at that distance. My next thought is, could this be a bat? Anyone who's ever been to Waverly knows that it's constantly swarming with bats that aren't shy around people, but I can rule that out too, because when the shadow crossed the transom, it did not appear in the opening or on the wall behind it. The anomaly itself also didn't look like something that could have been a bat or any animal. It wasn't just a slightly darker patch of wall than the rest. This was a total absence of light, almost like a black hole, or something that our senses can't process, and so we just see true nothing, a sort of file not found for our brains. As exciting as it is to see something on camera, it's hard to look at this footage and say I've definitively captured something paranormal. One could easily write this off as video artifact. GoPros tend to generate a lot of noise when your ISO starts getting above 12 or 1600, and when you look at the footage, there's definitely a fair amount of artifact. However, what it does have going for it is when you slow down the video and look closely, our shape looks pretty out of place compared to any ambient artifact in the area. It's darker, larger, and has a more definitive line of motion than anything in its immediate surroundings. I showed this to several colleagues, both in the professional film industry as well as the paranormal, and the consensus was that, yes, there's definitely something going on there, but it's a shame you couldn't have gotten something a little more definitive. So unfortunately, this one isn't quite as compelling as what I'd hoped to find on camera when I got home. But what it does do for me is that it reinforces my eyewitness claim and lets me know that I wasn't imagining things. I certainly don't expect this video to convince any skeptics. If it were any grainier, we could call it Bigfoot. It's not conclusive, but there's a sense of validation for me that I think every investigator chases for themselves when they experience something similar to this. It was definitely the highlight of my night, if nothing else. This last one is another one of those blink and you miss it type captures. This was caught around 2 a.m. on the 3rd floor. The DVR camera picked up a shadowy figure glide across the corridor extremely fast. Watch the end of the hall very closely. I analyzed this frame by frame as best I could. The footage we have here is from our older DVR system, and it's pretty low res. What we have to work with is several frames of extremely grainy footage capturing something unclear at a great distance. Sounds about right. When you look at it frame by frame, it almost appears to have a normal human height as it first crosses, but then shifts into what kind of looks like a deer. While we can't really identify a shape to determine the culprit, we can rule some things out. First, let me say I don't think it's a deer. Since this is on the 3rd floor, and my cameras cover all the staircases, I would have seen it coming up. I don't think I could have missed something as large as a deer. And for that matter, a deer, or any animal, would cast a fuller, much darker silhouette. This almost looks transparent. All of the other investigators had left for the night, leaving only myself and 2 others in the entire building. So I can immediately rule out this being a person. And if that's not enough, I'd been seeing people on this camera all night moving about the halls, and can easily say this does not appear to be a human when placed side by side with a known person in the same vicinity. Basing the depth on the people I have in frame, the figure appears to be exiting in the middle of the hallway, several doors past the exit sign at the center of each hall. The light at the end of the hall is actually another camera's IR light, so if anything were to pass that far in the background, it would have been seen on both cameras. Again, I had to ask myself, could this be a bat? I've been watching bats all night on camera, at various distances in various parts of the building. Bats in the foreground that would be large enough to create this shadow reflect IR light and therefore have a lighter appearance. They also are pretty easy to identify as bats. The same can be said of other possibilities such as floating hair, bugs, or dust. All of these are easily identifiable on camera at close range. Bats at the end of the hall wouldn't quite be large enough to create this figure, and I have plenty of examples of bats at the same depth as the figure appears to be, and they're very easy to identify. My final thought was maybe this was a swarm of bats, but even bats at the furthest end of the hall are still pretty obvious. So those are all the things I can comfortably say it's not. As far as what it is, I'm not sure. There's not a whole lot I can do with this video to raise clarity. It's hard to tell what the actual movement and shape of the figure is versus what's the camera trying to make a shape out of too little information. But what we know for sure is that the camera had no trouble distinguishing solid figures of humans and bats at the same distance. So whatever this is, it doesn't appear to be a solid living thing. I have seen a similar YouTube video floating around, and I will link that in the description below. I can't speak for the authenticity of that video as I don't know the person who originally captured it, but it seemed to bear a lot of resemblances to what I caught. I encourage you to go check that out for yourself and see what you think. That's about all I can say for this video. Waverly is an amazing place to investigate, and we always experience something every time we go. I hope this was interesting, and if anyone has captured or experienced anything similar, we'd love to hear from you, whether it was at Waverly or someplace else. If you have any ideas on what you think these things might be, drop a comment and let us know as well. Be on the lookout for some more videos like this, and some other projects we have on the way. And a special thanks to Bill Miller of the Southern Indiana Paranormal Investigators for having me out to Waverly. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Keep up to date on all of our upcoming shenanigans and paranormal adventures. Thanks for watching. Here's Cora, being cute. Did you just lick my toes? I've never been drinking. Cora, you suck. Maybe this wasn't the best way to do this.